Thanks for tuning in. What you're about to watch is an interview that I conducted with Jeremy.eth, the founder of ittybits, which is a new collection on ETHscriptions. It's a 10K collection that is a homage, as Jeremy describes it, a love letter to CryptoPunks on a 12 by 12 canvas. We're going to go over Jeremy's history in the crypto NFT space, what led to ittybits, and where the future is. I think it's a really compelling conversation. So hopefully you're interested. Give it a listen and let me know what you think down below. All right, everybody, GM. Thank you for joining us today. It is myself, Doodlifts, and I'm joined here by Jeremy.eth, the founder of ittybits.eth. Super excited to have you here today, Jeremy. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to see you.
Awesome. I know this is a new community, and I'm super glad to have connected with you and to be able to get you on this episode of the podcast. Really excited. So Jeremy, like I said, you're the founder of ittybits.eth. We'll get into what that means very briefly, but why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a little bit about your history and maybe how you got into Web3. What's the Jeremy.eth story?
Perfect. Yeah, so I've been in the crypto space since about 2017. It was late 2017 when a colleague of mine started telling me about ETH and BTC and how I should look at the cryptos. I had looked at them very, briefly 5 or so years prior and dismissed them as just video game currency. And
we all do.
Yeah, as most of us do, right? Like, and at the time I was sitting, I used to work at Microsoft. And so this is where I was when I was deep in tech, but very much on kind of the corporate side, very much on the, on the inside of that space and not really looking at decentralization, not looking at opportunities in this space. But he convinced me to take a second look. I did. I started playing around with ETH and BTC at that time. And shortly after, he started pointing me to this concept of ENS domains. This was before you could buy short domains. It was 7 characters and up only. So I played around with a few of those early on and got hooked on this idea of, wow, these are decentralized. These are like web domains, but different. And from there, I just kind of started following the space a little bit more, realizing kind of the concept of digital ownership. I got really kind of connected to the news that ENS was going to release shorter names, allowing folks to reserve 3 letters through 6-letter domains. And so you can see I have Jeremy.eth. I've got all of my family's first names, essentially. And the popular first names like my wife's Julia.eth, stuff like that. So I was there from like the very early days of bringing on ENS into kind of the shorter domain space, which was a lot of cool to be there. I mean, there wasn't a lot of people there. I wasn't competing with a ton of people to get those short names. And then from there, it just kind of cascaded into learning more about art, learning more about kind of digital art on chain. Got into NFTs themselves probably late 2019 is if I can recall correctly. Maybe it was 2020, and bought a couple of NFTs, didn't know what they were, and then a couple of them went up significantly in value, and I was like, whoa, I should probably look a little bit closer at this. I knew about CryptoPunks, in 18 or 19, but didn't really understand them at the time. It wasn't until 2021 that I started really kind of digging in and reading about them and trying to understand kind of their provenance in the space and what it meant, and seeing kind of many of the influential people having CryptoPunks. And so that was a journey. I spent a lot of time. I have CryptoPunk 7741. I acquired that in early 2021. I spent a lot of time kind of researching before that acquisition and thinking about kind of what that piece meant. And through the course of that space and doing that, I had my 3 daughters kind of over my shoulder, seeing me do all this research and asking me questions about it. And then there was like this moment where, if you're ever on the CryptoPunks.app website, you can zoom in and you can zoom out and you can see all of the punks, and you can, scroll around and find ones that look like you. And my daughters kind of wanted that experience too, but they couldn't find the hoodie female. They couldn't find the cowgirl female. They couldn't find the smiling female. Females could only wear lipsticks, and they couldn't really show the emotion of smile or frown. And there's reasons for that. And I have threads on that, for example, in Twitter. But that kind of started that's where this idea of kind of derivative started, right? Like at that point, for the girls, I made them their own punks on desktop, right? I popped open Photoshop and combined the traits that they wanted into a female punk. And that was the end of it, I thought, right? And then I was like doing that process. I was like, well, wait a minute, like all the zombies, apes, and aliens are also male archetype. Why don't they have female shaped archetypes for those rare traits? And so I goofed around and I made some of those for fun. And then it kind of just unraveled, and I ended up making and partnering with another dev to make the Expansion Punks collection, and created a DAO around that. And there's a community around that basically we expanded the set into another 10K that balanced some of these inequities or some of the missing traits or whatnot. We called it democratization of traits across archetypes. And that was a fun project. It was really my first kind of foray into being a creator and making a collection and making something out of something. And that was 2021. That was in this space, that's forever ago. Right. Right. I mean, but my love for kind of deep diving on the traits and deep diving on derivatives and deep diving on how to build things out of that's where a lot of that sourced from. I went on to kind of build things like, I have this concept called the punk quadrants, where I break down punks according to punk derivative projects according to their kind of cohesion and coherence. Coherence being like their similarity to punk traits and rarities and stuff like that, and then their cohesion being like their aesthetic connection to punk. So you can kind of see this 2x2 matrix of high low on both of those cohesion and coherence scales, and you can plot different punk projects.
Like chaotic neutral. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I actually can pull up. I can pull up while we speak here an example of that analysis that it goes. It goes pretty deep, but there's a Medium article here called Punk Quadrants, where I go into kind of thinking through, what I term as derivative punks versus transformative punks, and then I have this whole kind of scale across what I said earlier, which was adherence to CryptoPunks trait assignment logic and adherence to CryptoPunks aesthetic. And then I name these kind of 4 quadrants around recast, expand, reimagine, and remix. And then I go through analysis here of what it means to be in each quadrant.
I did not realize, I knew some of your history, right? But I did not realize the depth. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about derivatives in this way, because I think derivatives can often be thought about as like almost like just because you can, or like, oh, it's a new chain, so you just throw an ape on there. Like, this is really different. And I like to hear your kind of interpretation of other derivatives as well. It's almost like you become the arbiter of punks derivatives. It's really interesting. But go ahead and share your next piece.
Yeah, my first, like, here's like the latest tweet that visualizes kind of some of the analysis that came out of the paper. So I have a thread where every once in a while I'll go in and I'll add new derivatives to it, so you can kind of see where different collections fall on the scale from coherence vertically and cohesion, aesthetic cohesion horizontally. So you can see things like CryptoPunks, obviously in V1 and V2, it's the same collection, just a different background, how those fall at the very top right. You can see things like funks that are a flip, like their trait adherence is very high because it's the same traits, right? Their aesthetic cohesion, falls slightly to the left because they're actually flipped the opposite direction. So there's a difference. They actually look left, so that creates a pretty big visual difference. Wides is a great example. I love that collection.
Love wides.
Yeah, it's such a cool collection. It's super high on the adherence logic because it is the punks, but they're just being stretched every time they're transferred. So they're and that's why it's the only one that has a moving visual on this, because as time goes
As they get
by,
wider.
they just keep getting wider every time someone sells one or transfers one, and they're going to continue to just move to the left until they get to 0 at some point in terms of adherence.
The limit does not exist.
A limit does not exist for that collection, which is pretty crazy. And so, yeah, you can just kind of see where a lot of these collections fall. And this is my opinion. It's my analysis. I get to own this quadrant because I made it. But it's kind of a fun read. If you take the time, I'd love some feedback. I'd love some critique. I'd love some, let's build it together. Let's add to it. I did make a rule early on when I made this that I would not assess collections that were not 24 by 24 pixels. So I'm in a quandary now about ittybits.
I was wondering where ittybits would fall on the spectrum.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I would probably put ittybits way high on the adherence logic, because obviously it is the same traits, but it would have to somewhat be somewhere over here close to wides probably, because the aesthetic cohesion it's there if you blow your eyes, but it's not there if you're actually studying the collection, because it's 12 by 12, and there's a lot of visual compromises and visual decisions that had to be made to make it fit within 12 by 12. So it's probably going to be somewhere in here between funks and wides, but very high on the coherence scale, and medium to low on the cohesion scale.
Yeah, this is fascinating. This is incredible. I feel like we could talk about this for quite some time, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to at a later date. So let me just kind of unpack a little bit of your history here. So you were saying that you were early to kind of ENS, and I thought about that. You're like Jeremy.eth. I was like, this is pretty impressive. It's really cool to hear. There's kind of a family affair too, that you got all the ENS names for your family. I love that. And your history with CryptoPunks and the amount of thought that you've kind of put into interpreting the collection and in understanding the collection is fascinating. I mean, I'm going to dive into those threads. I'm going to dive into those charts, because I think that's just really, really interesting, and a great lens to view all the derivatives through. Love hearing the history of expansion punks, because I didn't understand that was the reasoning there. And once again, that adds to the fact that it's not a derivative just for the sake of being derivative, right? It had a purpose, had a really cool story and a reason. And once again, your family being involved just makes it that much more, I don't want to use the word wholesome, but in this space, I feel like that should have some value, like just that it has a purity to it, which is really great. But we're mentioning ittybits. I feel like we're circling the drain. We're talking about it. Let's get into it. So you have this history in Web3, a long one, as a matter of fact, quite a storied one. How does that lead you up to ittybits, and what is ittybits for those who are unfamiliar? Let's just dive right into it.
Yeah. So I'm always playing with punks and doing things to them, and making memes with them or making analysis with them or whatever. So inevitably, I'm always doing something with them. And I follow a lot of people that do the same. If you there's a lot of artists out in the space that are doing interesting things. One of my favorite is Piv. If you don't follow Piv, you should.
Is that Glass Punks?
Yeah, he did Glass Punks. He almost does these like almost every day. Like the creativity is just always flowing. He's just doing something. He's reinterpreting something. He often does it with like a look to art history. So he takes the punk, the 24 by 24 canvas, and he's able to kind of reflect on another historical piece of art through the lens of the 24 pixels and the punk archetype. Like he just does a lot of really interesting kind of things that make you stop on the timeline and look at it and think about it.
Yeah, I've noticed like him and Jaleel.eth and Jack Butcher, they kind of all seem to like interplay off each other, which is that kind of like creative spirit.
Yeah, it's a very cool space. And so I do stuff like that on the side. I try to do kind of, really interesting interpretations too sometimes. Sometimes I just do stupid meme interpretations as well, like yesterday's with the Gary Gensler and the Bitcoin glasses.
It was great.
But sometimes it's a cool space because it allows for kind of a lot of creativity. I love cramming creativity what was into the 24 by 24, 576 pixels. And more recently, it's like, well, how creative can you get within 144 pixels at 12 by 12? And so there's another pixel artist I follow out there named Jay Peter, and he had put out something, I think it was back in March of 2023, where, you know, he put out a pixel piece of, maybe it was like 5 by 6, maybe it was 30 punks at 8 by 8 pixel, really small. And you could stand back and you could look at these 64 pixel, you know, punks. It wasn't a whole collection. He didn't try to do the whole 10K to my knowledge, but he did these like 20 or 30 collage or whatnot of these. And they were mostly like the, you know, well-known punks
Sure.
in that piece. And you know, frankly, I should probably pull that up too, just to give kudos and give flowers to that.
Yeah, why not?
But that was, I sat there and I saw that and I was like, that's really cool. I wonder, first of all, I wonder what mine would look like, right? Like what would 7741 look like in that view? And so I think I was on a business trip at the time, and I was in Cali, and I was done with my meetings, and everybody was, you know, the team was going out for dinner. I think I had dinner with the same team the night before, so I was like,
oh, just like yeah, like, hey guys, I'm gonna stay back tonight. Don't worry about me.
Yeah, I was like, you know what, I went out last. I think I had too much to drink the night before, or whatever. So I was like, let me take an easy break tonight. I want to kind of play around with something, and yeah, I went back to my room and I was like, can I do this? Can I make something in 8 by 8 that looks like my punk? And that was cool. Here's a great one. Let me pull this onto the screen. This is the one that I saw here. This one in the middle. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I think Jay Peter posted this just more recently, if I'm not mistaken. So I grabbed that too the other day just to put it into a tweet. But this one in the middle is what like really captured my imagination of what's possible. And I went to work. Like I actually started trying to build the full trait set in that 8 by 8 format to see if I could recreate that look. And I got halfway into it, and I realized like it's just not enough space. You need more space. And so I tried again at 10 by 10, and I still couldn't get. I mean, I think these ones, I think they look amazing. Like I think both the 4x4 and the 8 by 8 look amazing, but it wasn't what I was going for in terms of differentiation, the ability to kind of reflect the full personality of everyone. And so I tried again at 10 by 10, couldn't get it to work. And then I tried at 12 by 12. And that's when, for me, my aim and when it started to kind of shine through was at the 12 by 12 level. And so, and that was months ago, right? That was probably, I don't know, like May, June, when I started kind of centering around the 12 by 12.
May, June of 23.
Yeah. That's probably when it started to really start to look like the look that I wanted. And that's also when I was, going hardcore into, well, how do I separate this? How do I make it more than just a bunch of 144 pixel, derivs? Like deriv's a deriv. I like derivs too, but how do I give it something unique? And that's when I realized, my love for the data, my love for the way that these things are expressed as well is you got to present it in a way. You got to give people a way to play with the collection, to explore the collection, to be able to see things in the collection that you can't when you're just maybe scrolling a marketplace, right? And so that's when I realized, like, all right, I got to learn how to build a site. Like I've partnered with other people in the past, and they've built the site. The site's never really done for me what I want the site to do. I really need to learn how to build a site, but I'm not a dev. So let's see what AI can do. And that's where I started playing around with ChatGPT and learning how to prompt and code at the same time.
So at this point, are you committed to creating the ittybits collection? Like
I didn't.
I'm doing this.
I didn't. I was committed to attempting a full 10K and committed to getting it out there in a way that people could play with it. I didn't have the name ittybits yet. I think I bought the name in September. So that there's a little bit of, that's on-chain provenance. You can go back and see when I registered ittybits. But I was still brainstorming at that time, like what would they be called? I was also cautious around like, I was exploring for a long time, like, well, which it was either going to be ERC 721 or perhaps ETHscriptions, because I started playing with ETHscriptions the day the protocol first launched. I was playing with it and learning how to kind of use the protocol. So these were all kind of decisions early on of like, where do I place these, and how do I put them out there in a way that that is meaningful for them, and so I was committed to doing something with it, but I didn't quite know. And then I was talking to different people. I was sharing. I had a version of the website. I'd say 80 to 90% of what you see now on the website was built by September, because I did take it to the Beeple event in Charleston. And
cool.
So I met with, I don't know, I did a couple of like punk dinners or brunches or whatever, and I did show it to a handful of people. I was trying not to kind of show it to everyone, but I showed it to maybe 5 or 6 people, got some feedback. And it was at that event that I realized, okay, the people that I showed it to, they're punk owners. They'd have an opinion. None of them hated it. A couple of them asked me for the phone back after a couple of seconds, because they wanted to continue to play with it. Especially like this experience is magical on the phone. I mean, if you're out there and you want to check out ittybits, just go to ittybits.xyz on your mobile phone, and the scrollability, the ability to kind of play with the entire 10K with your thumb is magical. And I'll show you kind of how that manifests here on the desktop. You can scroll, you can zoom in, you can select one. Look at this guy with the hoodie and the pipe. You can zoom out. Of course, on your phone, it's even more fun because it's pinch to zoom and whatnot. And so you can see, like, it's a pretty cool experience. You can, if you want to see, 8348, you can navigate straight to it.
We know that one.
So yeah, it's the 7 trader seed phrases. So like, it's just a really cool experience, and I wanted to bring that to the collection. I wanted people to be able to play with that. It's very reminiscent of what you can do on the CryptoPunks website, on their CryptoPunks.app. But what I did to go further is I brought all the traits forward too. So as soon as you touch an ittybit, the traits come forward.
Now, I don't want this to be overlooked, because you mentioned that you're like, oh, I wanted to make this website, so I started kind of talking to ChatGPT. So, I mean, you seem like a fairly intelligent fellow, but you're not a developer, correct?
I'm, not in the least. Never learned any code or anything like that. Last time I coded something that I would say I truly coded and worked on hard was like probably my MySpace page in 20 years ago.
Getting the right music on there, getting
the right backgrounds, getting like customizations on the MySpace page. I say that in jest, but like, yeah, I mean, my history. I was a marketing operations person at Microsoft. I'm a PowerPoint guru. I've done a lot of technical work, but I don't do code at all. And so what I learned in this space was, using ChatGPT, and I'll probably, for the developers out there, pardon my lack of probably the right way to explain it, but I learned how to use Windows command prompt to deploy kind of a local host server on my desktop that could mimic hosting something on a website. And then I learned how to structure React files in folders on a desktop folder. And then I learned how to prompt and ask for JavaScript, essentially, that would do the things that I wanted to do. And then I would literally send ChatGPT to GitHub pages. Like what you're seeing, this experience here is an open source React component called OpenSeaDragon. no relation to OpenSea, the marketplace. It's
Right.
open because it's open source, and the Sea-Dragon component is the pinch to zoom experience. So there's an experience that does this called OpenSea-Dragon, and then of course it doesn't have this like nice ittybit panel, and it's not built this way. But like then I just spend, and this took me days, right? Like many days of like sitting in front of ChatGPT, asking it
Right.
how to customize the CSS, how to build, how to like, I had to like basically, it's embarrassing probably how long it took me, but how to get it to kind of portray the things that I wanted it to portray in the way that I wanted to portray. How did I have to structure the data and the CSV files in the back end? So I did that all back and forth prompting. And that's why it just took me so long to do, was because I was coming from a point of view of like, I didn't really want to bring in, it was kind of a personal challenge for me too, right? I didn't want to bring in a developer just to do this all for me, because then I'd have no control over it. I'd have, I'd not know how it was built. I'd not know how to kind of engage it and edit it in the future. But yeah, so the story there is just back and forth, learning how to ask it to do these things and like slowly doing these things until it started to actually look like a web page. And then after it started looking like a web page, I learned through ChatGPT how to push it through Git to what's it called, to Netlify, which hosts the image, or which hosts the endpoint, where everybody's serving it up from. So yeah, I mean, and I admit I'm still not a developer. Like you can't learn the skills that, I mean, I showed in the last kind of month or so before I announced and before the site went live. I brought a friend of mine in who is a React developer, and I showed it to him and I asked him to take a look. And he looked on the back end, and I gave him access to the Git and all that kind of stuff. And he made some, code changes that made the site more efficient. That, I think my all 10K ittybits were loading too often. Every time you clicked on a different tab up here in the header, every time you clicked, it would I think it was loading all 10K again. So it was downloading 4 or 5 megabytes of ittybits every time. And he was like, no, we've got to clean up the way that works and make the site more efficient. So he did a lot of back end work for me that unfortunately I just didn't know what was going on with the scripts that I was copy pasting. But yeah, now the site is pretty smooth. On the Explore page, which I'm showing now, is a really amazing experience. This is an open source module from Microsoft called Sandance. And it blows my mind that nobody's ever deployed this before for an NFT project. If they have, please correct me in DMs or in the comments. But I discovered this months ago. I was playing with it. I was learning again through ChatGPT how to engage it and how to customize it. I built in kind of custom tooltips again, so you can select any grain of sand and see your ittybit. You can move the space around. You can shift and rotate. You can visualize all 10,000 in different ways. Here's a grid, for example. Again, you can see all the ittybits. You can do some amazing kind of, filtering. Here we can come in and say, just show me, everybody loves the hoodies. So let's go and find all the hoodies. You can see them in yellow now, and we can isolate just those hoodies. Boom, here's the hoodies. Let's take a closer look. Looks like we have 2 zombie hoodies because I've colored.
This is incredible. And I just want to say, for those who haven't played with it, it adds such a depth and complexity to even exploring the collection, right? We all are used to combing OpenSea, looking at traits, filtering for traits. This is another level, and it's just so much fun. That's the other part that's so cool. Yeah. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah. I mean, look how quickly I can look at this, and I can now kind of see all the skin tones, and I can see in the hoodie space, there's 2 zombies, 1, 2, and there's looks like there's 1 ape in the darker fur. And then there's a bunch of albinos, lights and medium and dark skin hoodies. And then I can persist that, right? So I can say, well, let's look at those guys as stacks. So I can kind of see right now how they fall across zombie, male, and ape. But I can also say, you know what, for the type, or for the x-axis here, I'd rather look at it based on facial hairs. Boom. So now there's all the facial hairs, and I can see how how those hoodies now break up across facial hairs. I can play with it this way. You can also discover some really cool stuff. I mean, one of the things that you could use this for is to, discover, let's clear everything out and let's go back to all 10,000. And instead of grouping by, facial hair, because you're going to see all the females stack up at the very far right when you say group by facial hair, because none of the females, of course, have facial hair, right? So that kind of makes sense why you're seeing this huge stack on the none column. But like, let's look at things like eyes, for example. So now we're looking at all the different eye traits. And so you can see a lot stack up in the none, because many of the punks don't have eyes. Let's do a filter here and just play with, I don't know, let's look at female.
If you like Dune Analytics or Flipside, you'll love ittybits.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. So now I filtered just to the females, and you can see, again, lots of nuns, and you can start to see all the different eye traits over here. But then let's then cut it by the y-axis this time, and let's cut it by hair. And so now we see hair across the back, across the depth here, and you see all the eyes here, and you start to see interesting curiosities. Like, let's rotate it to this angle. This is pretty interesting.
For some reason, this looks to me like almost like a small city, like a small city or a video game level. I'm like, imagine if these were like little levels in a video game, right?
I was gonna zoom in and show you like one of the things that I was playing around with the other day that I realized was like, it does look like a street, and then a street right here on pilot helmet. Why is it a street on pilot helmet? It's because pilot helmet, if you have a pilot helmet, that's a hat trait, but on pilot helmet, you never have eye traits. And this is something I discovered years ago when building expansion punks, but now I can visualize it, right? Because now you can see, all right, if you have a pilot, and I'll just zoom in on a pilot helmet there as an example, they never have eye traits. They never have eye shadows. They never have glasses. They only have the pilot helmet. And arguably, that was probably a decision made by Larva Labs at the time. Statistically, it's impossible that it just happened to cascade that way, right? It was definitely a decision in the generation of CryptoPunks not to allow pilot helmets to ever have eye traits. You could argue it's because they would conflict with the pilot helmet. You could also argue visually there that there's already a set of goggles integrated into the pilot helmet. And so why would you have glasses and goggles on your pilot helmet? That would be weird. But it's through visualization like this that allows you to kind of bring out insights out of a 10K collection that you might miss if you're just trying to do all of that combinatory trait logic staring at OpenSea or staring at a traditional collection navigator, right? And so the bounds of this are the bounds of this are pretty remarkable. Like there's so much that you can do with this. You can right now I'm sorting, everything is colored by the skin tones, but you could also say, actually, I want to color everything by mouth traits. And then you've got this now everything is colored based on whether they have black lipstick, hot lipstick, purple lipstick, or none. You can
all of this.
Let's go back to grid, and you can see all those now in a grid. Like, it's just, there's just so much you can do. You can look at this.
All of the same stuff is true for OG CryptoPunks, correct? Because the traits for ittybits and CryptoPunks are one-to-one.
Exactly. That's the fun of this, is if you just want to explore the CryptoPunks collection, do it through the lens of ittybits. It's the same trait data, one for one. The charts will be the same. The images. I actually had a version of this at one point where there was a toggle at the top of the ittybits page that you could toggle CryptoPunks versus ittybits, and just the imagery would change, like just the tooltips would change. The images on the tooltips would change. It slowed the site down a little bit because then I was loading 20,000 images instead of 10,000. But it's that just shows you kind of, the usability of this experience transcends just ittybits, if you will.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, okay, so
we could, and this is only available on desktop. This experience wouldn't work great on phone, for example.
Sure. So diving a little bit more into ittybits. So just to kind of, I don't even want to recap here, but ittybits are 12 by 12 CryptoPunks derivatives with one-to-one traits. they're the exact same as far as the distribution goes. Obviously, they look a little bit different. If you look at this animation that's showing on the screen right now, you kind of see the reduction from 24 by 24 to 12 by 12. Now, there is a difference as far as the image itself of the ittybits and the CryptoPunks, but it is maybe invisible. Maybe there's more than meets the eye. So there's something called the transparent pixels. Do you want to kind of show people through the Explore page what that means? What is the true background? And maybe get into a little bit of the hash mining a bit, because I think that lends a little bit of an extra layer of complexity. And I think I heard you mention it's called proof of work at some point too, which I think is cool. So I'll let you tell us all about that.
Yeah. So I'll show a couple of things. Let's kind of drill in on an individual ittybit page on ittybits.xyz. And you can see, wow, the site's loading slower than normal. Okay. So you can see an ittybit, right? Up close and personal. This is ittybit 7741. This is the ittybit variant of my punk 7741. And you can see all the traits, but there's a couple of things that are a little bit different on this page. One is, you can quickly see this concept at the bottom of the trait called the signature pixel. What does that mean? In every ittybit, the very lower right pixel right here is always the hex code of the ittybit's own ID. So it's a self-referential hidden pixel in the PNG. You can't see it as a human, but you can with Photoshop. So when you actually download the file, the actual file that is ETHscribed onto Ethereum's call data on chain, that file itself looks transparent. Like it's going to look like the transparent ittybit with a background that you can put anything in the background you want. But the reality is all those background pixels actually have a minimum setting on their opaqueness, and what they actually look like is this. So if you remove all transparency from an ittybit, they actually have values in every single pixel. And why would I do something like that? Like, that's not what CryptoPunks did. But the reason why I did that is very key to what differentiates this from just a derivative, from just another collection. What happens here is I wanted a way, there's a couple of reasons for it, but I wanted a way for every ittybit to actually reference its predecessor as an homage in the SHA-256 hash of the official file that is ETHscribed on chain. So you can see there below, whenever you turn this on or off, the SHA-256 file hash appears. I'm going to try to zoom in here. And
go for it.
And you can kind of see the file hash here ends in 7741. And for those that aren't technical, that might not mean much, but it's actually a pretty significant kind of technical feat, because file hashes through SHA-256 or any other hash algorithm really are deterministic but random, right? Like there's no way for you to forcibly assign a SHA-256 file hash to an image, to a video, to a file, to whatever. Give it a good example is you can take any file. You can take a 5 gigabyte file or a 50 kilobyte file, whatever, and put it through the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, and it will always spit out this 64 character hexadecimal string that's unique. And I mean, so it's not about this doesn't actually store the data. It's only 64 characters. It doesn't store the data of the image, but it hashes it down into a deterministically unique set of 64 characters that are just completely garbled and random. You never know what they're going to be. I could literally take the ittybit file and make one tiny change, imperceptible to the human eye. I mean, it might not even be a change in pixels. It might be a change in metadata, or it might be a change in something else. And that's going to have what's called an avalanche effect on the SHA-256 hash output, meaning the cascading differences as it gets down to 64 characters will be, it'll be completely different. It won't look at all. It won't even be like one character change. It'll just be completely different, right? And so the probability of actually, making a 10K and having any one of those 10K assets actually have a matching SHA-256 ending 4 characters is also infinitesimally small, right? And so the way you do it is you have to do something. You have to keep creating the same ittybit over and over and over again, testing different changes to the ittybit until it creates a SHA-256 hash that matches the ittybit number. And so for every ittybit, I had to figure out a way to do it first. Like one was, okay, I could add different stuff to the metadata and just change the metadata each time until it created the right hash. My initial calculations on that, though, was that would increase the file size too much by adding all the EXIF data, because all of these have stripped EXIF data, so that I'm trying to minimize the size of these files so they fit in the call data, and I wanted them to be as cheap as possible to ETHscribe for gas. And so then you start to wonder, like, well, what else can I do? And then I realized, well, I've got all these transparent pixels to work with. What could I do with those transparent pixels that still the human won't see, but that the computer will read as different data, and thereby, through that avalanche effect, cause it to have a different SHA each time. And so that's when I started playing with, okay, can I, again, ChatGPT, thank you. Can I write a script that randomly assigns background pixels to any pixel that is 100% transparent, right? And then assign a value of 1 out of 255, being the max full opaque, 0 being fully transparent. Assign a value of 1 to that pixel. If it's fully transparent, assign a value of 1, and then just throw a random hex code at it, and then calculate a SHA. But always in the bottom right corner, and you can see that visualized here, always in the bottom right corner, make sure that pixel is always forcibly 00 ID, like the ID number, right? So in this case, 007741. And so no matter what ittybit you go to, let's go to, what's your ittybit number?
Oh, shoot. I just got this this hoodie one last night. It is 8713.
8713. Okay, so here's your ittybit. Let's turn on hash pixels. Love and it. 8713 is also a shade of green. And it's it's not surprising. 8713 is pretty close to 7741, so it's a similar shade of green. It's different though. Every color is very different when you actually look at it through kind of Photoshop. And I'll show you that here in a second, like how you can actually inspect all of them at one time. Sure. But that's that bottom right. I call it the signature pixel. It's always going to be, no matter what, if you interrogate the actual PNG that's described, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be self-referential, and it's linking back to itself, but it's also linking back to the CryptoPunk from which it came, which is kind of fun. But then all these other pixels you see around, yours are different, right? So, yours is, some shade of, I don't know what to call that, purple, mauve, whatever. Next to it on the left, let's just go back and see what mine was on the left next to mine. Please don't be mauve and make my example bad. Let's turn
well, so to kind of reframe this maybe in more like layman's terms, it's randomly generating these background pixels, almost like a QR code that points to a website is maybe another way to kind of conceptualize it. And so you generated many of these until it pointed to the right address, essentially.
Yeah. So for example, to create 7741 with a matching SHA, I would have, on average, if you do the math based on the probability of hitting the right last 4 characters in sequence in the last 4 of the SHA-256. I actually did the math somewhere. I think I'll probably post the math again on Twitter today. It's on average, each ittybit had to be created about 65,000 times. And so some of them you get lucky, right? I logged, when I did the script, it took the script about 30 hours to run. I'm running this all from just like a 4 or 5 year old laptop. I'm sure somebody has a much better multi-core modern processor that can do this maybe better than I can, but I'm running this all on older hardware. It took about 30 hours. I set up the script. I played around with smaller batches of like 5 and 10 to make sure that it would do what I was trying to do before I let it run for 30 hours. But I didn't have like on-screen printing. So when it was running, I kind of just had to walk away and be like, God, I hope this works. I went to bed after it ran all day, woke up the next morning, came down to check.
Hoping it didn't crash in the middle of the night.
Yeah. The command line kind of tool was closed. I was like, okay, that's a good sign. looks like it finished something. And then I went and found the folders where it sent everything. I had it send all the PNGs that were found and send the log files of how many attempts it took to find them, which is pretty cool because now I have all the raw data. So for each ittybit, I know the best one took only six iterations and it hit jackpot, right?
Wow.
Which is amazing. Only had to kill 5 ittybits to build that one hash matched ittybit.
The graveyard of ittybits that came before it.
But the one that took the longest, and I tweeted about this as well, it was 506,000 ittybits died in the making of one ittybit. And that's just, 500,000 ittybits are in the wake, right? 648 million plus ittybits created and discarded to curate the final 10K. And I mean, this is a script. This isn't me pouring over Photoshop for 648 million iterations, but it's the script running random attempts, random colors in the background. Does this Shaw match? Nope. Keep going. Nope. Keep going. Nope. Keep going. And it's doing it, multiple, in a few seconds per ittybit, probably. Like if you do the math over, I think the total was about 30 hours. And so, yeah, but it's slowly looking at these, and like when it finally finds a match, it prints it as a PNG over to a folder, and it logs how many iterations, and then it moves on to the next one, and it moves on to the next one. And that's cool because now we have this whole collection where every single asset self-references it with the signature pixel, but also, if you right click, and we can do this real time. Let's do this. So
it'll be so interesting over time as people start to kind of really dive in and investigate the collection. If they start to ascribe value to if it took less iterations, like the 6, or if it took more, like what is going to be interesting to people. I just think that's fascinating. It's just a whole additional layer. It's like it's invisible metadata. I don't know. I think it's just going to take people a while to digest what this is, and I think it's just really, really cool.
Yeah. So here's let's open this up. Here's a tool that I use sometimes. You can use literally any SHA-256 online hashing tool to do this. But this is just an open, this is just one that I use on someone's Git. So let's just drag, this is the ittybit. Let's just drag it over here into the drop file, and then it runs the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, and you can see it hashes out to 7741.
And it adds, I think this was getting at too, like almost an extra layer of being on chain. Like but it's embedded in the image itself. I just think that's so cool. And I love how in the signature pixel, it's just self-referencing. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
so and then I guess one other thing I'll show on that is
go for it.
An interesting way of looking at it as well through Photoshop, for example, is this might look familiar. This is all 10K of them in Photoshop. This is the official file of the 10K. I SHA-256 hashed this one. Well, this is what I hashed before anybody knew about this project on the Twitter timelines. I hashed this. My first tweet under ittybits, just scroll down in Twitter and find my first tweet. It is a recognition that I didn't share this image, but I shared the resultant SHA-256 hash saying, all 10K ittybit artwork can be found in this hash value. And that was a provenance play on my part to kind of show, because I knew as soon as I let people see the website, I knew people would start scraping it. I knew people would download as much as possible. I knew they would put it on ordinals. I knew they would put it on other platforms and whatnot. But I wanted people to be able to connect the art and connect the originality of it back to ittybits. So I SHA hashed it. I published the hash publicly. I also on 12/26, again, before I shared any of the work, through my own kind of Jeremy.eth account, I wrote a note into the call data of Ethereum to kind of put it, onto the blockchain forever, referencing the hash of the image again. And then I just shared, I think it was yesterday, I just shared the image publicly. So ittybits.xyz/ittybits.png. You can go and download the official kind of 10K, hash it yourself and match that back up to the hash values that I published, in advance of ever sharing the work. So there's a provenance there to kind of proving that, when you see these 12 by 12 ittybits, they may be called something different when people have put them on other platforms or other networks. They all source back to this collection on ETHscriptions, and that's pretty cool. And the other cool thing about it is, again, these look like transparent backgrounds, but if you kind of just take a look at up in this upper right, this is where like the color picker is telling you what the color values are. When you're on an ittybit like this beautiful one here with welding goggles, obviously you can see the colors changing every time I move to a different pixel. But when I move to the background, they're still changing. There's still colors back there. You can't see them because they're 99% transparent, but there are colors back there in play. And if you kind of come to the bottom right pixel, and let's like select this one here, and then if I want to see what that color is, let's open the color. That's 4937. 4937. So let's remember that number. And let's come back over here. That should be my welding goggles. There she is.
Incredible.
So that's pretty cool. Like even the provenance of the kind of original 10K composite image still contains the connection through that signature pixel back to each ittybit where it is in the matrix. But then it also ties it, of course, back to its originating factor in the CryptoPunks collection.
It's fascinating, and I really do. I hope people might have to go back and listen to this podcast like 3 or 4 times just to really digest this. Now, I do want to kind of get to this fact. You mentioned ittybits potentially being on other protocols and things like that, but to go backwards a little bit, you mentioned that ittybits are not ERC 721. They are ETH scribed. Why? Maybe just give your high level take. What are ETHscriptions for those who are unfamiliar, and why choose ETHscriptions for ittybits?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something more innovative than just another derivative in the space. And you can see kind of a lot of these things, a lot of the decisions here actually converge on why I did the hash pixels on stuff like that. So I had been playing around with ETHscriptions, since the protocol launched earlier in 2023. I was fascinated by it. I thought it was very empowering to someone that is not a smart contract developer, doesn't do that kind of work, to still be able to put something on chain. And it's as simple as if you can make a file small enough, you can load it. You can load the data URI into the call data of an Ethereum transaction, and the protocol will recognize it. And there's tools that people have put out there. There's even a nice tool on ETHscriptions.com where you can upload and sign a transaction, and it scribes it for you. So there's tools for making it simple, but you can also, with a little bit of work, frankly, a little bit of ChatGPT, you can learn how to do some of this stuff as well on your desktop and do it at scale. And so I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated about putting stuff on chain, finding permanence, and resurrecting perhaps digital art from prior, or digital assets that may have felt like they've been lost, finding those and putting those on chain for permanence. I found a lot of joy in that. And I was playing in that space at the same time that I was ideating around this collection. And I was going back and forth. I was like, well, should I do it as are there enough people that know what ETHscriptions are yet to make this meaningful? Or, will it have more resonance just in the traditional space? But the more I learned about ETHscriptions, and the more I learned about kind of like the alternative way of looking at Ethereum through ETHscriptions and through, putting things into call data and the efficiencies, the lower gas related to transactions and all that kind of stuff, I realized there's a lot of interesting parallels to, more efficient use of what we know as Ethereum through ETHscriptions, and the more efficient use of pixels from what we know as CryptoPunks through this lens of ittybits. And the more that kind of connection started to hit for me, the more I realized there's not the ETHscriptions market is still small. There's still not as many people that really understand what it is, but maybe this collection can help bring more eyes to the protocol, and maybe more people can start to understand the parallels that, under the radar, the parallels between efficiency and getting, finding use out of that smaller space in the way that we've attempted to do here with ittybits through ETHscriptions. And then came this idea, like one of the things that also prompted and led to this idea of like hash matching was the idea of, which I love about the ETHscriptions protocol, is it has this principle of first come, first scribe. And what does that mean? It means the first person to put an image on ETHscriptions like owns it, right? If you sign a transaction and ETHscribe something in its byte perfect format, nobody can ETHscribe the same thing again because the protocol only recognizes the first instance of that ETHscription. Of course, somebody can right-click, download an ittybit, change 1 pixel or change 1 byte of information within the metadata or whatever, and it creates a cascading avalanche effect on the SHA-256 hash of what that data URI is, and they can ETHscribe it because the protocol will recognize it as a different file, of course, right? But it
won't have.
But what creates is this idea of like, well, if you can prove the provenance of the original 10K because it comes from a specific address, for example, or whatever, then nobody can ever go ETHscribe those and sell those again or put those on the market again. That's not a case in ERC 721. You can put the same collection pointing to the same IPFS link or pointing to the same asset 1,000 times. In that space, you use smart contracts to designate provenance and to designate, what's original and what's not. But in the ETHscriptions, like it really is the data URI itself that makes it unique. The data URI is the textual kind of version of the image through code. And if that's unique, it can only be done once. A great example of this is in my early days of exploring the ETHscriptions protocol. I was going back in like Indiana Jones style, like looking for old vintage PNGs, looking for old vintage images. If anybody's familiar with archive.org, you can go and scour the early days of internet and pull up web pages from 1993, whatever, and pull up like very rudimentary pages. But you can right-click save some of those assets and ETHscribe them for fun, just because the first person to do it owns it. And I had a lot of fun doing that with going back and finding. I literally found the first PNG files that were ever published online.
That's awesome.
It took me like a week to find it, and reaching out to retired engineers that were part of the team that researched and designed the specification for the PNG file format. But I was able to find like early PNGs. I was able to find what I think is the first ever Google logo on one of the Google founders' PhD, essentially his PhD MySpace page from Stanford at the time. And it's just fun because you're like actually finding these digital artifacts that people don't even know exist and putting them on chain in a way that nobody else can come after you and put the same asset on chain. And when I say the same asset, like it's this idea of byte perfectness, right? It's as it left the author or the creator's computer when they saved it, that is the byte perfect format. Anybody can go and change something and like upload it again, but if you own the byte perfect format of it, it's provable through anyone going back and finding that same asset on that page through archive.org. So those things, that idea of kind of byte perfectness struck me, and the idea that if I share this collection in advance and people see the collection and they right click save the collection, they're going to front run the collection and ETHscribe it. And then I won't be able to launch the collection because everybody will just, that happens all the time where people like right click save and like they want to ETHscribe something. So that's when I was like, well, then I got to do something. I got to do something sneaky with the backgrounds. I got to do something to make the collection unfront runnable, if you will, by creating the 10K in a way that only I know the SHA-256 hash values for them until it launches. And then once it launches and they ETHscribe out, then anybody can know. But try it. Try to right click save this one here. Save image as. Go try to ETHscribe it. It won't let you. You'll get an error if you're using any of like the UI friendly ones. If you don't and you do a raw ETHscription of it, the transaction will go through, but indexers won't pick it up because it'll be recognized as a dupe as a dupe of something already described.
Do you look at like protocol and procedure as a medium for art? That's just, I'm just kind of like picking up on this. It's really interesting, like your decisions to do ETHscriptions, because it's the spiritual kind of connection.
Yeah, I mean the decision to put it on ETHscriptions is as much a, like the whole project is as much a love story to my passion for kind of punks and the history of punks, as it is to my passion for kind of exploring this new space of operating on ETHscriptions, and still having this idea of like, well, it's on Ethereum, but it's using this innovative approach to interpreting Ethereum, and that's part of the art as well as part of this kind of experiment, if you will, of testing the marketplace, testing people's minds around acceptance of this new way of thinking about Ethereum.
Yeah, the layer 1.5, if you will.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have all this work, and I say that not lightly, all of this work leading up to the mint. You partner with ordex.io as a launch partner. You have an allow list, which was a really fun thing to watch happen on Twitter, X, if you will. And then comes mint day, right? So what was that experience like for you, minting out this collection on ETHscriptions on Ordex?
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, I want to give absolute just flowers to the community as well, because I knew I loved this collection. I knew I loved these little pixels and how they present themselves on screen. I had so much fun, learning and building the site and building the experience and building everything. And I got some good reception from the few punks that I did show it to back in September. So I had an inclination that it would go well. But I was overwhelmed. Like, I started the Twitter account. I started tweeting some stuff. People really picked up on it pretty quickly. People did try to front run. People did try to put it on other platforms or other protocols. But of course, they had my decoy assets. They didn't have, when I built the page originally, I made sure I was using decoy PNGs on the site and all that kind of stuff, so that if they did try to ETHscribe any of that stuff, it wouldn't be the official hash matched versions. But yeah, I mean, I guess, that's it. It's flattering that people would go through that work anyway to try to do that and to try to take the stuff and put it on other chains. But yeah, really just the follower count. I mean, we've got close to 3,000 or 4,000, I think, followers on Twitter, which is great. And that grew really quickly. It grew from zero. I mean, it was all organic. There was zero, this was just me. I don't have a team. I don't have a community manager. I don't have a Twitter person. This was just me kind of posting stuff from my main Twitter account, my personal Twitter account, and then posting stuff and helping to tell that narrative and showing samples and stuff like that from Twitter. It grew pretty quickly. Partnered with Ordex, who was great with kind of, and the Ordex partnership came around like that, right? I don't think I even reached out to them until sometime in, maybe it was early December. Maybe it could have been even mid-December. I'd have to go back and look at chats, but it was pretty quick. It was, hey, I've got this collection. It's really damn close to being ready to go. I don't want to write the smart contract for the minting process, because that's dealing with other people's money, and I just don't want to take that risk. I'd rather have a seasoned, Solidity dev write the smart contract. But I want to partner with someone that, can get these up quickly. So when it mints, I feel like it's going to mint fast. I want them to be up in the marketplace pretty quickly. And they, kudos to them, because they were really responsive. They jumped in. I think they saw the potential in the collection the same way that I did. And I'm not joking. It's really mid-December when I pinged DMs and I was like, hey, I've got something. Do you guys want to partner on this? And I was like, let's launch the last week of December. And they're like, oh, we got another couple of things launching, but maybe the first week of January. I was like, boom, let's do it. And then it just cascaded really quickly from there. They dedicated really a bunch of the team to working on it with me, to getting the mint page set up, to getting the contract thought through. I worked directly with the one of the co-founders there to kind of really think through the best way to make the mint process fair. We have a joint thread or maybe a Medium article kind of in the process that we hope to publish soon. That's going to be a replay, kind of a post-mortem of the mint so that people can understand how the mint worked, how we used kind of provably fair future Ethereum blocks to add entropy or randomness to the minting process. And then we'll kind of walk through like how you can replay the mint process afterwards so that you can kind of see that for yourself. And that's, those are things that haven't been done on ETHscriptions to my knowledge yet. So
Right.
We wanted to kind of really break the mold with this and provide a template going forward for launches to look to. And I want to bring more people into the space as well, into the ETHscription side of the house, to understand that there is something over here that is collectible. There is something here that you can provably own with an Ethereum address. And trading these things is way cheaper because they don't interact with smart contracts. They're happening in the call data. And so, when gas is high and you're paying 30, 40, 50 bucks to transact on Ethereum ERC 721 contracts, you'll be paying infinitesimally less dollars, like individual single dollars at the same time to transact on here. When I was, I transferred the other day, I transferred my wife's ittybit. I found one that looked like her. I transferred it to her wallet. It cost me like 77 cents, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with a smart contract. Send assets for, send assets on ERC 721 like that. It'll cost way more. So again, it brings us back to that parallel story between ETHscriptions and traditional Ethereum smart contract based collectibles. That efficiency. I toyed with kind of a more efficient Ethereum, more efficient punks kind of tagline for this. But it's a mix. It's just a mix. It's a mix of this really is the confluence of passion for punks, passion for the history and provenance of punks, and then the passion of kind of exploring new areas with digital collectibles, exploring new ways to use the pixels you do see and the pixels you don't. Just there's a lot there, and there's a lot that there's a lot that the community can build from this too. Like I want to recognize the community again, because they came together quickly. Like the mint was amazing. Like we had an allow list that I think burned through 60% of the mint pretty quickly. We had only a 1 hour allow list, and a lot of people were competing to be on that allow list during the whole Twitter run up. And then we had the public mint start after 1 hour, and the public mint lasted, I want to say, like 7 to 10 seconds, and that's it. Like 4,000 ittybits were sold in like 7 seconds. I'd love for somebody to actually go back and look at the mint contract and like give me the math. But I didn't even. I tried to mint another max mint of 15 during the allow list or during the public list, and I couldn't. Like because I was also on a Spaces call talking about the launch.
Nice.
It went to public. I was standing, I think, in the room. I walked over, tried to press mint, and it was like, nope, transaction failed or something, like sold out or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I guess that's good. But like,
I didn't expect that I would get front ran out of my own collection here. All right.
I mean, it went so fast. And so yeah, and the community came together quickly. Like the day after we put up a Discord. People are in there chatting already. You can see the community kind of really coming together and like talking about what they love about the collection, how they see the collection, how they see it as different, the stuff they want to do with the collection. And there's rich data here. Like it's, like I said, like the Explorer is out there to play, like the visualizer and whatnot, but there's also a ton of rich data in the pixels that you don't see, right? And that's what I'm also excited about, is what can we do with the pixels that you don't see? I'm going to be writing a script soon to codify all of the pixels from each punk into a database so that we can open source that and people can see how many of each color of each pixel are in their backgrounds, for example. Wow. Imagine the possibilities where people can use that data to we can do a lot with that data. Like there's already people talking about things that they want to do on their own with the data, building another collection that, references the hash pixels in a way that ascribes rarity and whatnot based on hash pixel occurrence, right? And so lots of cool ways to slice and dice the collection using the stuff that you don't see in the collection, which is
someone I saw made a point that the background, the true background, is in a way generative art in and of itself. And I thought that was that was a really interesting lens. And I like that you use the word confluence. That ittybits is this confluence, because that's how it felt to me. I think my first ETHscription was a scribe by John HQ. So I won't even say I minted that. That was like, he laughs about how he did that. He said it was cursed the way that he did everything. They ended up in emblem vaults, and then he had to send them out individually. It was like a whole thing. And then I minted MF which was its own experience. But ittybits, it felt like almost like a coming of age for ETHscriptions. I was like, oh, like this marketplace has a launchpad, and it's a mint, and there's an allow list. And it felt like a moment for ETHscriptions. And so that's why I just think it's this story is so compelling about yourself building up months and months, it really years and years, if you really look at the true narrative of what ittybits is, coming to this moment. And like you said, it clearly resonated with people. Public minted out in 10 seconds. And, what is it? A week later, week and some change, ittybits have done almost, if not maybe exceeded this point, $250,000 in secondary volume.
Yep.
Which is incredibly impressive. So just want to give you your flowers. It's quite a sight to kind of watch from the sidelines.
Well, I mean, it's not possible without collectors that kind of see past the surface, right? Like,
right.
It's amazing to see people understand it. Flowers to you as well. Thanks for bringing me on to talk about it, because part of my goal for this is to have people better understand like what it can be through like additional work. And again, like I'm not a developer either, so like figuring out some of the stuff. Jump in the Discord. Let's talk about it. I'll share information. I'll help you however I can with figuring out kind of new ways to kind of use the tech, new ways to use AI to help. Part of what I want for this community going forward is just to foster that type of spirit within the community for folks to jump in, share what you're doing, I'll find ways to kind of publish data or publish assets from this collection so that they can interpret and use data points in different ways, build together. Like that's really what I want to do in this space is continue to learn myself, continue to, and now I have a whole new, 12 by 12 canvas to work within, right? Like I've been doing a lot of my own kind of interpretations and artistic kind of license, explorations on the 24 by 24 canvas. Now I have this whole new 12 by 12 space to play with. And so there's definitely things I want to do. There's definitely something I have been playing around in parallel for all of 2023 that I'm excited about. It is something that I think is something that I can bring as an offering both to ittybits and to CryptoPunks, because I think the tech is parallel and it works for both. And so I've been working on it. I just need to kind of continue to work on it, and it's something I'm excited to kind of bring soon, I hope. But so stay tuned for that. I'm working. Like there's still stuff to do, and there's still stuff that excites me about bringing to the table for this.
Love that. Hey, if you're working on it, we're excited. Now, like CryptoPunks, CryptoPunks happened, and they are, if you will, no utility, right? Since then, and not that ittybits needs to quote unquote provide utility, but you're clearly still here. You're clearly still interested in building. So what you mentioned, what you want the community to look like. What does the future of ittybits look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like there is no roadmap, right? Like sure. I am working on stuff. There's stuff that like intrigues me about this space and about the canvas that we're dealing with now in 12 by 12. There's stuff that kind of intrigues me about how to use ETHscriptions in new ways. There's a lot of new innovation coming along on ETHscriptions. There's Facet Protocol. I know I haven't even scratched. I've been so focused on this, I haven't had the chance to really scratch the surface of all that new work that's happening. So I want to stay connected to that. If there are Facet experts out there that are already digging into that and really understand that space, let's connect. Let's build together. Let's figure out like what the next extension is that brings ittybits, forward in that space as the tech evolves. So I definitely want to, I'd like, aspirationally, I'd like ittybits to be seen as, blue chip in the ETHscription split, in the ETHscriptions space, in a way much like CryptoPunks, where there is no roadmap. It's just known as the early, one of the early collections in ETHscriptions that have checked a lot of the boxes and that have done it in a way that is that can persist. And I mean, it's not an early ETHscription in the state of things right now. It's in the 4 million range in terms of ETHscription count. Of course, there's lots of other awesome collections that have launched over the last year. Kudos to all of those communities and all those groups. Those are awesome. But like, I'd like to bring more eyes from ERC 721. I'd like to bring more collectors from other spaces. And I feel like the punk-ish approach but with the novelty of what's gone into it, has some pulling power and has some identifiable characteristics that collectors feel comfortable in, that they can come in and they can understand the space. They can understand, for those that are snipers, they can understand how to kind of work that market, to collect within this space. I think it's imminently approachable for the people that are familiar with other collections on Ethereum. And so for that, like, my goal is to bring an air of OG-ness to the ETHscription space once we get the masses in, right? Once more people are in and understand the space, like, I'd like for people to say, hey, at least I have an ittybit in the space, like that shows that I was early enough in ETHscriptions relative to all the masses coming down.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that phrase, some OG-ness. And that is the cool thing about ittybits is, in my perspective, it is artistically and technically impressive enough to stand on its own as a feat, if that makes sense. Like, and it will persist as such. Yep. And new collectors can approach it and they can be impressed by it and then dive down the rabbit hole should they choose to. And there's plenty of meat on the bone for them to really fall in love through that journey. But like you said, what's cool is you're still here, you're still building, you're still investigating and finding your way. You've clearly been in the space for a long time and will continue to be. So I just want to congratulate you. If no one has already, on the feat that I think that you truly have accomplished in doing this. And I think that we're all excited to be along for the ride in that way. So flowers to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. I'll be on more spaces. If you want to chat, just reach out to me in DMs. Join our Discord. I'm jumping into general channel on Discord. I publish announcements. Just join us. Come chat and visit ittybits.xyz. Take a look. There's links out to all the stuff directly from there, whether it's the marketplace, the Discord, the Twitter. Start there and start exploring, and give feedback. Like, we're real time, improving the UI on the site on the back end. We've made multiple updates in the last 48 hours. We're really bringing forward kind of the usability of the hash pixels and the signature pixel on the UI so that everybody can understand and tell that story. And we'll continue to kind of find ways to kind of, help people understand it's not a derivative. It's a seductive reductive is what I coined the other day. I thought that was brilliant because it's a love story back to punks. Yes. But it's also a love story for kind of the future of what we can do on Ethereum, perhaps in more efficient ways.
Love that. Seductive, reductive. That's much more elegant. My tweet this morning was small punk, big dreams.
I love that too. That's cool too.
So yeah, Jeremy, absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. I learned so much more than I thought I was going to through talking today about ittybits. It's just been phenomenal. So once again, I would encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast, listen to it twice, listen to it 3 times, because I can guarantee you have not digested the totality of information that has been compressed into this almost a little over an hour podcast. So Jeremy, thank you so much. And I'll see you on the timeline and see you in Discord.
See you soon. Thank you so much for having me.